Hey everybody, how are we doing? How are we doing on this fine Thursday? It's good to see that we have a pretty decent number of people starting out, considering that I moved up an hour and we didn't really give people a whole lot of notice. So today, if you noticed, Deathjack is off to the side. He's actually almost done, but there's really nothing exciting to do with him today. I'll show you where he's at right now. I actually just have to wash his hand over here and then do some dry brushing, and then literally the only thing left is to figure out how I want to do these stacks to make them look like, you know, like they're glowy and billowing weird greenness. But we may go over like some of the dry brushing just to show you how stark the effect can be. But other than that, we're going to start working on this guy. So yep, let's go ahead and get started. And suddenly everyone bailed, probably because they realized there was not 40k being played today. But either way, we're going to continue. The show must go on for all two of you. So as you see here, he's been base coated in brown. And we're gonna not do anything unusual or weird here. We're gonna go with pretty much the standard Liberator, look. We're still gonna use Retributor armor and Arc armor gold, and maybe even a little bit of. We may actually do our highlights in Runefang steel. We'll decide as we go. May not even use the Arc armor gold. But here what we want to do is I want to actually try and experiment here. I know it works pretty well with silver when I've done it for my Grey Knights. I want to see what it looks like when we try to do gold with a similar technique. And what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush this stuff on and see if it gives us a good looking gold. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I have not tried this yet. I don't know what it's going to look like. It could look amazing, it could look okay, it could look absolutely terrible. We're going to find out in just a minute here. And a lot of it depends on this Retributor armor, which seems a little bit runny. Not necessarily the best for dry brushing, but we'll see. The brown may not be dark enough, but that's okay, because we may just wait until we've finished everything else for the armor, or for the gold, and then just wash it at the end. Hey, Frontline Gaming, thank you for the host. Much appreciated. Frontline Gaming is always there for us. If you appreciate their support like I do, check them out and see what they're up to. So here what we're trying to do is paint our gold on top of something that actually has color, a non-metallic color. And the hope is that that will give us the appearance of a little bit more depth and possibly a little bit more realism. May not work, but also not necessarily realism, but if you've ever looked at like Custodes, which are solid freaking copper color, sometimes something that just removes just a little bit of the sheer metallicness out of something can make an all-metallic army look a lot more bearable to to stare at. And that's kind of my hope here, is to make this model a little less garish, but still be able to use metallics to paint it. And if you want to go just pure metallic, easy enough, just paint it this color, Agrax Earth Shade, dry brush it this color again, and then dry brush it like either a light silver or a lighter gold, and bam, you're done. That's it. So this is pretty much exactly the same number or difficulty of steps. Not really any change in terms of how hard it is. It's just a different approach. Both work extremely well. I'm trying this one because, you know, like I said before, maybe a little bit less gaudy. In addition, it actually lets you be a little bit brighter, I think. Because I think if you just go solid metal, you really kind of have to wash it very dark in order to not have it look really awful. It's not always the case, but if you don't want to have to spend a ton of time on it to make it look good, then this may actually give us what we want. Now I'm going to put on my glove because I should have done it before. And I think this glove is getting close to its last legs. It barely wants to go on now. Good enough for now, though. So is anybody working on anything today? You guys just checking in out of curiosity or watching while you work? Hopefully on a miniatures project and not actual work, because that's not fun for anyone. Unless your job's fun, you know, it could be. I think you're probably lying, but now, a thing to note with dry brushing, you don't have to have, you know, just get, so, I mean, you can barely see any paint coming off on here, and that is not a problem. Not a problem at all, because that gives you more control over how quickly you build this gold look up on your models. Yeah, is it a little bit slower? Yes, it is. If you're trying to speed paint a whole army, then you might want to go with the solid metal dry brush, solid metal Agrax and then dry brush, because you can go heavier on the dry brush with that and go faster, and it's not so bad. That's pretty cool, Kinzor. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you, Queenzo, if you spelled it right or not right now, honestly. I'd have to go and either look up the model or ask a Latin professor. So, but last time I asked a Latin professor for help in doing something related to Games Workshop, it took her 3 weeks to get back to me. We're like, really? Is it that? Wow. Okay. But to summarize that story into a very short version regarding that the Latin professor, basically, if you want to make an Iron Warriors tank and then like have iron within, iron without, like, you know, stamped across it in places, you know, to give it a little bit more, you know, flavor. Just do it in English. Don't bother trying to do it in Latin. It does not translate well into anything that, you know, keeps the original intent. At least that's what I was told. Now in Russian, it actually, I think it translates decently. So I thought about doing it in Russian, but that's a whole other story. Alright. Now my plan is, I'm thinking once I'm done with this step, add a highlight step, and then I'm still going to wash it, but I don't think I'm going to wash it with Agrax. I think I'm going to wash it with Seraphim Sepia. Something that will more bring the colors together rather than try to just darken them utterly. I think that's what is really needed, is just something to grant them a little bit more unity. And I was just thinking, I probably should have looked up what blues I need to paint the panels, because I am going to do them in the you know, standard gold and blue heraldry. And I'm hoping I actually have the right blues, because I was at the, I mean, I literally bought this Shadespire kit today, like around noon, 1 o'clock, and I should have looked up any paints that I possibly needed that I didn't have. I knew I had the golds, I forgot about the blues, so hopefully I have them already. If not, well, there's a lot of other stuff we can work on today. So that's not a problem, really. But it would be fun to actually get most of this guy done today, if not all of him. That would be pretty cool. I suppose I could use a different blue. Seems kind of weird though, because that blue for those guys is just kind of iconic at this point. Of course, there's a ton of different ways you can paint Stormcast Eternals, not just one way, obviously. But I'm weird like that. When I choose something, I try to be somewhat loyal to it. So, Kinzel, the new Knight Vexilor, how is that thing? I haven't even, like, I have the new White Dwarf, but I haven't even looked. It's the new one, right? Or am I wrong? I could be wrong, because I don't really... I'm not as up on 40k models, new 40k models, as I should be. Ah, alright. Alright. The good thing about this is, unlike airbrushing, if I really mess something up later that ends up hitting one of these metal areas, I can just paint it Mournfang brown and dry brush it again. You know, do the whole process again, but at least I can fix it completely. Though I don't think that'll be a problem. These guys, Stormcast Eternals, tend to make it pretty easy to stay within the lines, if you know what I mean. This is Retributor armor on top of Mournfang brown spray. Now, actually, it's also a little bit, like, I touched it up with actual Mournfang brown also. It's actually kind of strange because when I first started using the spray, it seemed like it was darker, noticeably darker than the out-of-the-bottle Mournfang brown. But now, they seem to match. Obviously, the Mournfang brown in the bottle did not change. It's the same bottle, same consistency. So maybe it just had to air out a little bit, or maybe I just didn't let it dry, let the out of bottle Mournfang Brown dry enough before I really tried to compare them, because Mournfang Brown's considerably lighter when it's not dry, when it's out of the bottle. But once it dries, they match up pretty well. I couldn't tell where one began and the other ended, which is, yeah, that's I'd call that optimal. Let's see here. What was I going to look at? Oh yeah, I had it on my browser. Okay, okay. Yep. All right. Okay. Obviously, not everything that's getting gold on it right now is going to stay gold, but this is the messiest part of the process. And if we started painting something else before we started doing the gold, it would just get gold on it. So, yeah, I probably don't need to belabor why we're doing this step first. As far as the overall color scheme, I'm probably not gonna deviate much from the very standard, which if you just go on GW's Shadespire gangs, you know, their page where they talk about the different gangs, or whatever they're called, the war bands. I am just looking literally at the picture of this model that they have on their website, and then saying, yeah, I like that, I will copy it, or like, yeah, okay, I can do this and I like it better, and then I do that instead. Like, for instance, at the end of his weapon, they paint these little lightning bolts are painted silver. I'm gonna try them in gold. Maybe I'll paint this little ring silver just to, you know, make it look different. We'll see. But for now, I'm going with this. Alright, how are we looking here? Okay, just this one part over here. I think we'll be done with the first step with the gold. Alright, there's step 1 complete. That doesn't mean the gold armor is complete. It's just the first part of doing the gold armor. Now we're gonna try to get as much of the stuff off of our brush as we can. Yeah, that's exactly right, Kinzo. It's, you know, you paint your model how you want it to look. If it looks good, it looks good. If it looks like crap, it looks like crap. It has nothing to do with, you know, if you copy pasta, that's up to you, man. You're like, you know, if it looks good, it looks good. And GW usually picks a scheme that looks good, most of the time. You know, when they started painting the Custodes vehicles sheer copper, okay, that was not good, but they probably shouldn't have done that. But usually they make really good decisions on color choices, and I don't fault anyone for copying it. I don't at all. Like, if you're going to do Death Guard, you know, most of the time you're going to do it Death Guard green or bone color, and those are the two standard GW army colors for Death Guard. You know, is to do it this bone color or to do it, you know, Death Guard green. Does anyone give anyone crap for it? No. So why would they give you crap for doing the same thing with Stormcast Eternals? It doesn't. There's no reason for it. And you know, Stormcast Eternals with their form lend themselves well to, you know, being painted metallics. You don't have to, but they work well with it. So why not? Alright, we're going to try Auric Armor Gold here. And see if this is a good in-between before we put on silver. I am not utterly convinced, but we'll see. It's actually not bad. Yeah. Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile. Does give it a little bit more richness, I think. And keep in mind, you know, this scheme actually, the reason why I think, you know, just from a theory perspective, of why it works so well for Stormcast Eternals, this gold and blue with, you know, some red elements, that is literally the triumvirate of superhero colors. Is, you know, or the primary colors, you know, red, yellow, and blue in some combination. And, you know, gold is just, you know, metallic yellow. I mean, if you look at Superman's costume is red, or is blue with red and gold elements. And, you know, that's not an accident, because that combination kind of evokes a, you know, good guy, heroic feel to it. And, you know, when you look at your Stormcast Eternals, you know, they're supposed to be the good guys. And so you want to, you know, sort of evoke that feeling, and their base combination of colors does that extremely well. So, yeah, why not stick with it? That's not to say that other color combinations don't work. They certainly do. Yeah, certainly work well. I mean, not every superhero out there, obviously, is primary colors. That's why you got Green Lantern, Green Arrow, you know, lots of secondary color superheroes. But some of the ones that are just automatically, you know, this is a good guy when you see him, are usually primary colors, like Captain America, Superman, Iron Man. Yeah, Batman's kind of weird because he's blue, but he's also like super dark. Sometimes he's just black. But at the same time, you know, well, if you go to like old 60s Batman, then yeah, definitely. He was definitely a little bit brighter. And, you know, of course, the Joker is always, you know, purple and green, and, you know, or something like that. He's always, you know, a combination of secondary colors. So sometimes they'll do that for villains. Like, it was pretty common to do that. It probably, you know, it's still not uncommon, but not quite as common to use secondary colors for villains. And obviously, it's never been exclusively the case, because we have guys like, you know, Green Arrow and Green Lantern. There's probably a purple superhero that's a good guy somewhere. I couldn't tell you who it was, but... Alright, let me check. What do these... Oh yeah, there you go. That's true. Yeah, Hawkeye traditionally has been... Oh my god, who's calling me? Alright. Give me just a second here. Hello? Alright, well, that was fast and easy. We'd like to talk to you about your current car insurance payment. Well, I would not like to talk to you about it. Yeah, not interested. Sorry. And I wouldn't have even answered the phone just now, except I just started a new job, so I don't want to miss something if they want to call me and tell me about something that I need to know or need to answer. Like if they have a question for my background check or whatever, which I think is already finished anyway, but I don't want to miss any of that. So otherwise, I would have just made them leave a message and call back later. But nope, as usual, whenever you answer your phone, it's some scammer who wants you to, you know, consolidate your student loans through them for, you know, like twice the annual percentage rate, or, you know, wants to call you about your credit card. You have trouble with your credit card. Like, no, I don't. I'm going to be starting a job as a clinical assistant at in an oncology department about 2 weeks from now. Actually, a little bit less, on the 23rd of this month. So, looking forward to getting back into working again. It's been a while since I've been going to school for many years now, so I really am looking forward to being a productive member of society. Okay, so I think the Auric Armor Gold is a decent addition. I think it brings out the gold color a little bit more after you apply the Balthazar. So, yeah, let's keep it in there. Now, here's the tricky one. The Runefang Steel, because this is silver, we don't want to overdo this one at all. We want to be very, very sparing, and I still have gold left in my brush, and we don't want that, so let's continue the purge. I would just use water, but, you know, it doesn't really work well when you need to dry brush immediately after. Though, it may actually be faster to rinse it out and then dry it than to try to get the old paint out. Either way, this should work now. We should be good. Alright. So here we're just going to be very light, very gentle. And there's already fuzzies getting on the model. Probably went a little too hard on the paper towel there. Just enough to get little silver highlights on the edges of things. Ooh, be careful there. Probably maybe a little too gentle on these silver highlights, but it's better to be careful and have to go back and keep adding more than it is to take your first pass and end up overdoing it. That is the one thing you really don't want to have happen. Alright, this is a little bit more. So remember, we're doing gold, so we only want a hint of silver at the edges. that happen? There we go. It's just... Do I need to clean my gloves? Is this my gloves doing this? Could be that. Yeah, sometimes... That's the one disadvantage to wearing gloves, is when you open bottles, sometimes if the bottle has crud on it, it'll get on your glove and then you won't notice. Because you can't feel it, you won't notice it until it gets on what you're working on. So, I have to be a little bit more careful here. It's always a good idea if you wear a glove, like after you open and close a bottle, check your glove and make sure it's still clean. I have not, obviously not perfected that. Need to discipline myself a little bit better with it. So case in point, since I ended up getting some of that silver here, I had to scrub it off. And so now I've got to go back and do a little bit of touch-up to my original gold. Thankfully, the Mournfang Brown base coat was the spray, so it adheres a lot better, so it won't come off when I do the scrubbing. Alright. Like it never happened. And can't forget about over here. Alright. Whenever you're doing a face, always remember to do the highlights just a little bit stronger than on the rest of the model, if not noticeably stronger. Because you always want the face to be a focal point. Alright, so that's the nice and easy way that we're doing gold so far. I think it's pretty good. I like it. So now we have to decide, do we want to add the sepia wash to it or nah? You know what, let's hold off for now, because we can actually add that wash at any point, because it's just going to be a thin wash to kind of just pull things together, all the different steps that we did, just kind of unify them. And I'm not sure that we necessarily need it. I'm going to start doing some of the other parts, and we'll decide then, and go from there. And if we decide that, yeah, you know, maybe we do need to tie these things in a little bit more, then we'll add the wash. Alright, so let me look real quick and see if I have the blues we need. And if I do, then we can begin with the blue. Alright, Hammers of Sigmar Liberator. Let's just cheat and look at how they do this. Well, I may actually have all these. Is this really the blues they use? Huh. Okay. Alright. Let's gather from my bucket o' paints. Alright. A Lightalk Blue was on the list. Okay. McCrag Blue is not, but I'm going to sit it to the side just in case I don't have the other one. Cantor Blue. Okay, I'm pretty sure that was the one they specified. And Hoeth Blue. Alright. And there was a fourth one. I don't know if we really need 4 steps, but let's see, a Lightalk Hoeth Drakenhof Nightshade. I think Drakenhof is might already be on my table, but I'm going to check here real quick while I got this open. Alright. Okie doke. So, I think the Drakenhof Nightshade is honestly probably the one we need the least. Actually, Drakenhof Nightshade is not. Yeah, it is a wash. Okay. You know what? I don't need a wash for this, so we're not worried about that. We're not going to use a wash on the blue. I should have. Yeah, when it said Nightshade, I probably should have immediately thought, oh yeah, that's a wash, and I'm not using a wash for this. So, let's see how we like this. Luckily, we have a nice big surface here we can test this color on. And, you know, as much as, I like complex models as much as anyone else, but every now and then you got to appreciate a model that almost seems paint by number. And, you know, not all Stormcast Eternal models are like that, but they certainly lend themselves to being able to make the most out of a handful of simple techniques, I think. You don't have to go crazy with them to make them look decent. And do I, you know what, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do with this. Let's just see if I can remove that. So I think we want this to stay gold. May have to go and touch it up a little bit because it looks a little ununiform. Let's see. And the best thing about dry brushing a metal is that if you want to just wet blend a metal right on top of it, it's pretty much seamless, no problems. And it can fix areas where dry brushing, you know, where sometimes the pitfalls of dry brushing emerge. But for metallics, dry brushing is amazing to get things done quickly. So, if I think I can get an army done faster with it, I do not shy away from it at all. I mean, could I make the model more amazing looking if I if I spent forever doing like non-metallic metal or true metallic metal. Yeah, sure I could, but it would take me forever. I mean, I would still be on like maybe the head or chest piece and only that. You know, I would have basically 0 elements of this model done at this point if I was trying to go that level of craziness. Not to say that you never should, but if you want to finish a whole army, trying to do it like that is well, it might even just be pure madness, honestly. I keep getting over the edge here. I should just go this direction. That way, that just can't happen. That way we have... We can establish our boundary here. Alright. Hey, Science, how you doing today, buddy? Yeah, we started a little early. I'm gonna start trying to do the stream starting an hour earlier than the usual. That doesn't mean it's gonna be shorter. It means it's gonna be an hour longer. I'm still gonna stop at the same time, unless it's gonna be a work day for me, since I'll be going into work at 7. If I'm working that day, then I'll cut the stream off at 6 instead of 6:30. But even then, it's still a longer than usual stream. So, okay. So, I think that blue will work well. So let's try the next few colors it progresses into. Yeah, especially if you're doing Skaven. Oh my god, that's just so many models. Now technically if I wanted to, because this is for Shadespire, not making a whole entire army, yeah, if I wanted to go crazy, it wouldn't necessarily take me the rest of my life to finish them, but... I wanted to also kind of see, you know, if I was going to do an army of these guys, what would I be looking at? You know, so this is also out of curiosity for that. Now, let's see if highlighting this is worth it or not. Really should have thinned it out a little bit more. That's fine though. We can blend back into dark just as much as we can blend into light. So let's start with a little bit stronger here. This is going to look a little not so great at first. You got to wait for this stuff to dry. 175 skeletons. You know what? Even if I did that, the laziest possible techniques I know, that sounds daunting. Like super daunting. Even if all I did was spray paint them a bone color and like wash them sepia or agrax or something like that, and then dry brush them again, like with like a bone color and then like a little bit of white. 175 times that still sounds awful. I mean, I had a Tomb King's army for years, and that was literally probably all I had to do for them, and I never even got around to that. That's how lazy I was at one point with my painting. So one thing I want to see is do I want the blue part to get this light in any kind of large surface, or do I want to keep it the darker blue? I'll give that just a second. I want to look at something here. Oh, that's just kind of weird. Okay, so that's not really how they like to do it. But I see what they're getting at with theirs. So let's try it their way and see what we get. And here we're just going to paint on our lighter color and then use, yep, I'm getting careless here. Alright. And just push the paint around a bit. Not quite so needing to be precise here, because our darker color is way stronger in terms of pigmentation. So when we go to do shading again, it's going to kind of overpower the color we're trying to darken anyway. So that's the one we really need to worry about thinning. These ones we just need to make sure we got decent coverage, and then alright. Now let's bring forth the darkness. And here we're just using the original base blue, but a very thin. We're just thinning it out. I need to be a little bit more careful around here. Darn it. I'm supposed to... Alright. Yeah, that's what I used to say, is having an orc army is like, having undead. It's similar to that. But having an orc army is like having a kid in your house with Legos. You just find yourself stepping on them randomly, you have no idea why. You're pretty sure you put them away, but there they are, lying on the ground. And it's even worse if you're still in the middle of assembling them. Alright, let's try the light highlight that they recommend here. See if we agree with their wisdom. It's not bad. Gonna have to do a little bit of neatening up of the banding though. May not bug anyone else, but it bugs me a little bit. I suppose I could just taken things a little bit more slowly, but yeah, and you know why they were the worst? Because every one of them had a spear they were holding straight up. They all had the same pose, and it was all facing, like, all with upward facing spears. Yeah, those little jerks with their little moon shields. Yeah, if you think painting, you know, 1,000 dudes for your army is daunting now, try doing it when all your dudes look exactly the same, and it's just, you know, it may seem easy because you're doing them all the same way, but it gets tedious really fast. Oh well, we'll just go the other way then. Yep. Hey, White Metal Games. Thanks for yet another raid. Appreciate it. We appreciate the support, and we're glad to have you. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And Poxwalkers, man. Well, at least Poxwalkers are interesting because you know when you have 50 Poxwalkers, you're probably still not having to paint the same guy more than like 3 times at most. Well, maybe no, because there's what, 10 different sculpts that come with the box set, and then there's like 4 more, something like that, with the ones that come with them. So actually, yeah, maybe you have to paint the same guy 4 times, but you shouldn't have to paint him more than that. All right, this whoa, get on out of there. Oh, there it is. Alrighty. I'm just fixing this here. Alright. So, need a little bit more of the lighter color because this is just a little bit uneven, and then go back with the dark again. This falls under the category of things that are much faster with an airbrush, but I wouldn't necessarily try to airbrush something at this point in a model unless I really wanted to mask the crap out of it. Yeah, thanks, Miss Squeaky. Yeah, this is my very first time painting a Stormcast Eternal, so a lot of this is pure experimentation. But so far, I'm liking how it's going, and may just stick with this for the rest of our warband and for this guy. So it may not have to hit the rubbing alcohol reset button on him once this is done. I think he'll be a keeper. Zinch Rainbow Warriors, that's I remember having to paint the old pink horrors and blue horrors back then. Back when you had to have exactly 2 blues for every pink. I actually kind of missed that rule where when a pink horror died, it spawned 2 blue horrors. Yeah, pink can be a pain. It's not the most fun color to work with. At least not at first. Just a little bit more here. I think we just kind of ignored this curve here too much. Still experimenting here to see how we ultimately want to do the blue here. I want to try to kind of preserve the darkness, but at the same time, you know, you have this curve here, and I want to kind of give it some emphasis without going too crazy, though. Almost thinking I should probably just paint this color on solid and then do the shading around that, rather than paint this over the shade. But I think the big problem is I'm not giving this long enough to really dry. So let's go ahead and start on this one and do that thing I just said. You see here the coverage is not nearly as good. Doesn't necessarily have to be for this part though, because we can just make sure our coverage is really good later in the places where we know this is going to stick around. At least this way I can see when this color has good coverage before I start trying to modify it. So overall, you know, I'm trying to go for something that's easy to apply and, you know, repeat, but there are some elements that are worth taking some time for. So, you know, making sure that your blue is sharp and crisp and, you know, bold. I think that's one of the things worth taking a little bit of extra time to focus on. Alright, let's start and this blue is actually strong enough, pigmented enough where this plan may just be completely in vain. But I wanted to give it a try. I have to do a little bit here because you can still see some of the brown through there. We cannot have that. But if it makes it just slightly easier for us to get on our lighter color, maybe this will have been worth it, but I don't know. I think we've been just as good applying the dark blue first. Let's go back here now that this one's dry, and we can see where we need to smooth things up a little bit. Remember, you trying to shade something, try to pull the paint from the lighter area to the darker area, and your blending will look a lot smoother that way. And same goes where when you're highlighting, pull your highlight towards the area you want to be lighter, towards where the highlight is going. Alright, now we're just gonna very thinly apply this stuff. Nope. Alright. So I know we got some new people since last I asked. Is anybody working on anything in particular today? Any projects trying to get done while you're watching? It's always a great time to get a project done is when you're watching a painting stream. I know a lot of people are at work while they're watching this and don't really have the ability to paint or anything like that. Oh, okay. Wow. They're shipping you a primer? What kind of primer are you using? Oh, okay. Never actually used any army painter primers before. Yeah, I usually just use Citadel primers, and they usually work well for me, so haven't had a problem with a Citadel primer in a long time anyway. There was a time, a long time ago, when I had some big problems with them, but they probably changed the person who makes them like 4 times since then. But if you remember back in the days when Battlefleet Gothic first came out, I primed my plastic Battlefleet Gothic stuff and it basically ruined them. That was one of the reasons why people liked metal so much back then, was because there were so many things that would ruin plastics. And, well, you know, also the metals tended to be less single pose models. There was more variety with metal back then, because it was cheaper to make the mold for a metal model. And it's still the case today. It's just pewter is more expensive now, so more economical for them to start moving towards all plastic minis. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully it works out. What are the minis you prepped? What are you going to be working on, Wicked? Still want a little bit more out of this lighter color. I'm gonna move it up the shoulder pad a bit. My preference is plastic all the way. I used to prefer metal for a variety of reasons. Usually, well, because back then, you know, metal models were more detailed. They were easier to redo if you wanted to, like, strip down a model from someone else and then start over on it again. It was really easy to do. But now that's sort of been outweighed by the fact that plastic models just come out so much more consistently now. They're just as much or more detailed now than, you know, metal minis were. And, you know, now you're not lugging around a whole ton of models just to go to one game. There's just a whole lot of advantages now to plastic. Resin is, to me, almost my least favored. because resin is the least consistent and the most fragile. And, you know, comes with other baggage that you have to deal with. Like, usually you have to wash it and scrub it. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with those. Yep. Does Raging Heroes do plastic now? I think they only do metal, right? I've gotten a few things from Raging Heroes in the past. But Raging Heroes is a small company, so I mean, you're only ever going to get anything from them, I think, probably just in metal. Oh, it's in resin? Really? Oh, yep. Yep. Yeah, that's the same thing I experience when I'm doing Team Yankee models. They'll just break while you're not even while you're trying to put them together. They'll be already broken when you get them out of the box. Alright, so that's where we are so far. Let's see what other blue elements we should put on this guy. Okay, his the straps around his belt and the tabard that hangs from his belt. So actually, not too many blue elements, honestly, which makes it not that difficult, you know, to deal with. Got a few areas where you have to spend some time, but overall, if I had to do an army of these, I don't think so far I don't think I would go insane. But at the same time, I haven't had to paint like one of those crazy celestial dragons or whatever the hell they're called, so there is that. But I think I can paint a Shadespire gang without going insane. So let's start there. And I'm still not sure about whether I should wash the gold or not. I'm still undecided on that one. Alright. Not gonna necessarily finish this part per se, but I'm gonna go ahead and paint these blue just so that I can continue on other parts with some idea of what the whole thing's gonna look like. So we're just gonna base coat these bad boys. The handle, no. I'm gonna do the handle in something reddish. Probably not necessarily the same red as their example. Probably something more akin like what I do with my Grey Knights, which you have not seen, so but they're going to be more red. Because I think that's what I want. I think that I want them to be more red. And so the handle, the scabbard, and things like that, I'm going to do in red. And I mean, even on their examples, they are a kind of red, but they're not a strong red. I think I'm going to do a stronger red. I don't know what the term is necessarily, like more vibrant red? More pure red? I don't know. And these should be easier than the shoulder pads because you just do the highlights around the edges. Well, I say that. Famous last words, right? Oh, that goes to... Never mind. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult when I get to the corn guys. That's a lot of skin. Skin's not necessarily hard, but it takes longer. Like what I did with the shoulder pad, you know, you have to do that across most of the model. So, I mean, as long as you know what you're doing, you can make it look good. That's not the problem. Problem is it takes forever. Problem is it takes a long, long time to do a lot of models with tons of flesh showing quickly and make them look, you know, really good. I mean, yeah, there are shortcuts you can take where you can actually make them look decent, and it's not bad. But we'll see what I decide to do when I get to them. Who is... Oh, I have to take this one. Hello? Alright, well. That was just a call from my doctor about a checkup. It said, everything is normal. Like, okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Yeah. Fun, quotation marks. Yeah, and Bone Ripper is what, about the size of like an oversized ogre? Because he is a rat ogre, I guess. If I'm thinking of the right character. You know what, I shouldn't even be so careful at this belt line right now because this belt is just going to get painted probably a leather color. So, it's definitely not going to stay gold in any case. So... fix up a little mistake there. Alright. So really, when we start getting all these other parts done, then we'll tell whether or not the gold is how we want it to be. Because you really can't judge the gold without the other stuff being there. That's not good. Nope. Need to be more careful. Thought I added... No, I didn't. Alright, well. Alright, we'll worry about that later. Music is fine for now. So for Skin Wicked, I prefer not to do dry brushing. It's just hard to make it look realistic because dry brushing flesh colors tends to make them look grainy, and graininess just kind of removes any realism out of something. Well, at least flesh anyway. Graininess works fine on metallics because metallics, the paints themselves are just grainy by nature because they're just metal flakes in your paint. And so, like, dry brushing with metals usually works just fine, as in this case. For flesh tones, it's a little bit harder. Yeah, you can do it. No, I'm not telling you don't do it, because you totally can. But there are some things you have to kind of accompany it with to make it work out. Like, one, you have to go light. You have to start light. You have to end light. You have to just have a little bit on there, and you just carefully dry brush it in. So what I would do if I had to dry brush the flesh onto a model, I would start with, putting on the color that the flesh is predominantly going to be. I would then wash it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a light wash, but the wash definitely has to be applied lightly, if you know what I mean. Like, you don't want it really darkening your flesh tone too much in the raised areas. If it goes in the in the recesses is fine, but you want to be sparing on the larger, the more raised surfaces, because the darker those surfaces are, the harder it will be for your dry brush to sort of blend in naturally. The more obvious it will be, the graininess will be. And then when you add your actual highlights by dry brushing, you just do them very lightly. Now, an alternative is that you can actually brush on the first highlight when you're sort of restoring your base color after your wash, and then from there you can do very light dry brush highlights. But honestly, if you want really good looking flesh, you really just gotta do blending, or or bring it all together at the end with either a wash or a glaze. And you'd be surprised the wonders that can work. Just glazing something at the end, or washing with just the right color that just like brings all the other colors, including the highlight, together, and it can actually make a really big difference to how the model looks. And when you're doing stuff like that and you can't decide what you want to go with, just experiment. Just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And when you find something you like that's not going to take you a million billion years to reproduce on your whole army, go with it. So, like, when you see me do Team Yankee tanks, or Flames of War tanks, they're, 15mm scale tanks, I will actually use a lot of dry brushing with those, because very rarely does the graininess actually interfere with the way the model looks, because most of the surfaces on the model are, pointed or sharp, or, there's not a whole lot of curved surfaces. And so it lends itself very well to dry brushing, because those sharp edges catch the dry brush very well versus any otherwise curved surfaces. And that's really what gets you with dry brushing. The graininess really comes from when your colors hit curved surfaces, because they won't consistently highlight that surface. They're going to just sporadically highlight it, and that's what gives you that grainy look that you have. And so that's really what you're battling when you're trying to dry brush something, Now this model obviously has a lot of curvy surfaces, and I definitely dry brushed this gold paint job on. But the reason why it kind of works is because it's metallic. Metallics, graininess, if you were here a minute ago, I said it before, graininess doesn't really hurt metallics, because they're already grainy as it is. So they're sort of granular by nature already, which is how I managed to dry brush this metallic gold color onto just a brown, and it still looks, it kind of looks, if you look closely, you can tell I started with a non-metallic color. But in a lot of places, it's not so obvious. It's actually hard to tell that the base for this metal is not metallic at all. So there you go. That's pretty much my summary for when it's clearly a good idea or clearly safe to dry brush a model, when it's boxy or when it's metal. No, actual metallic paints. Actual metallic paints like this Auric Armor Gold, like Rune Fang Steel, ones that actually have metal flakes in the paints. Models that are intended to look like they're wearing metal, not necessarily. If you're doing them in metallic colors, then yes. If you're doing them in non-metallic colors, other than just like the base color, like I used a base of non-metallic brown and then I dry brushed metallic gold on top of it, that you can do. But if you're just trying to paint like this shoulder pad, if I tried to dry brush this blue onto the shoulder pad, we know that this is intended to be metal, but if I dry brush it, it's going to look grainy because this curved surface here. Now this little highlight here, I could easily have dry brushed that on, and it would be difficult for someone to tell that I didn't, but why would I when it's just easy to go and bam, it's done. So yeah, there you go. If it's boxy or if you're using metallics, dry brushing, is safe to go. Otherwise, you're going to have to, decide the trade-off. Extreme highlights, you're just going over the edges, you just want to catch, the raised areas that are really sticking out, then you are probably safe to dry brush, even if the model's a bit curvy. But a thing to keep in mind also when you want to dry brush is that there may be elements of the model you don't want to get that color on, and when you dry brushing is a whole lot messier, which is why I did all the dry brushing steps first on this model. I started with them because if I'd painted all this blue first and then tried to dry brush this gold on, there's no way. I would get gold all over my blue parts. It wouldn't matter how careful I was trying to be. It would happen. And basically what I'd end up doing is having to just hand highlight everything that I was going to try to dry brush. So if you're going to have like a heavy dry brush step, try to do it in the very beginning. You don't have to, but you have to measure it against how difficult will it be for me to clean up any, mistakes that happen because of how messy the procedure is. Let's yeah, this one's a weird, because it's got this curvature here. Doesn't lend itself well to distinguishing between these two parts. But yeah, if you're going super crazy on a model like this, you would go with non-metallic metal. So you'd use no metallics, and you would simply use highlights in a very strategic way to make the model look like it's made out of metal. You can look up non-metallic metal, or NMM, as painters abbreviate it. And you'll see it gives spectacular results, but it is very time consuming, and it takes a lot of practice before you get good at it. And there are some people actually who can bang it out pretty quickly because they've done it so much. They look at a model and they automatically know exactly, where and how they want to do these highlights and shading. Well, it's not just highlight and shading. There's a lot to it. It's a completely different way of painting a model. And it gives spectacular results, but it's very time consuming, and I would probably never try to do that to an army. And I say probably, I mean I would never do it for a whole entire army. It would just take way too long. Like, I try to do it very rarely on my own stuff. And then there's true metallic metal, which means you take a metallic, but you actually use metallic paints, but you use some of the principles of non-metallic metal to make your metallic look a little bit more realistic. And part of that involves using saturation when you shade the model. And that means that what you're shading with actually has a real color to it, so that it looks a little more natural. That's part of why I do this technique, rather than paint gold and then shade it and then highlight it. What I do is I start with a dark brown, and then I just dry brush the metallic onto that. And that's what I've done in this case. And while it's not necessarily like the best way to do metal, it does have some advantages. It's easy. It adds some richness. Yeah, that's what I think. It gives a little bit more depth and richness to the model, because it actually has real color in it and not just all metallic. And in some ways, yeah, it can give more depth. As long as you do the highlighting properly and so on. Versus something that's just plain old painted straight gold. Now, if you add a wash to it, and do highlighting and all that, you can still get just as much depth out of it, but it may take a lot more work, take a lot more time, and you still won't have the kind of richness that I kind of like in it. And how did I get some blue there? That is unfortunate. Well, we'll just add that to the list of things I need to touch up. Just add a little bit of the brown, but then blend it around the edges so that when we go to fix it with our actual metallics, it'll be easier to match it up. That's a good time to go back and fix the things we started earlier. That's another thing about this technique, is it's easy to just blend in something by hand and not actually have to dry brush it again. Like, for example, if you airbrush an entire model, it's a great way to get like a model, you know, shaded and get, you know, at least some of its highlights on, and you know, make really good you know, blended looking transitions of color. It's an excellent tool for that. But once you've done that part, it's difficult to prevent yourself from having an accident where you get something on the model there and have to fix it. So, Adrakar, so what I did was I painted this whole model Mournfang brown. And then, rather than, and actually I sprayed on the Mournfang brown and just used the Mournfang brown out of the pot to touch up any places that my spray couldn't get to. And then I dry brushed on Retributor armor pretty generously, and then I dry brushed you know, some Auric armor gold, not quite so generously, but you know, just enough to make a noticeable difference. And then a very light dry brush of this Runefang steel, just to give it some, you know, nice edge highlights. Yeah, real simple, just set of dry brushes. I haven't even applied any washes yet. I haven't decided if I will. I might, you know, maybe just pull things together a little bit more. Maybe give him a little bit more darkness in the recesses. But I don't know that I really necessarily want to do that. I may just leave him how he is in terms of the gold armor, you know, and just do like I'm doing now, which is just, you know, fix problems as they happen. But otherwise, you know, I'm kind of happy with how his gold armor's turned out. So, but never be afraid to experiment with something if you're not sure. You know, hey, could it look better if I did this? You know, try it out on, you know, your prototype or, you know, another model or something like that, and see if you like it better that way. Worst that happens is you know, have to paint over it or, you know, strip it and start over again, which, you know, sounds horrible, but it's better than having an army entirely painted in front of you and then you decide you don't like it. Alright, let me need some more. Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about this technique, is that you get pretty decent depth on the model without making it super dark in the recesses, so that the character appears a little bit, you know, a little bit brighter, a little bit richer colored. Because if you use a really dark wash, sometimes, you know, your eye just tells you, oh, that's black, and then it just doesn't, you know. It registers as definition, but not color, which is usually fine on most models, because most models, you know, well, most, you know, surfaces on models like this blue here, if I had really dark shading in the recesses here, it wouldn't take away from anything. It would just look like, you know, it would just look like shading, separation, definition, whatever you want to call it. But if I do it here in these parts, then I'm taking away some of this brown color that's adding some of the richness to it. So I'd be adding some definition, but I'd be trading away a lot of the sort of rich color that I want to try to preserve for this guy. And that's sort of, you know, part of this experiment. It's the first time I'm using this technique for gold. I've done it for silver before, and silver is actually, yeah, it's I'd say it actually works better for gold than it does silver, because the silver, it's kind of a double-edged sword. but it's a trade-off you have to just kind of consciously make. Because when you do it with silver, you're not using brown, you're using more like a blue color. Actually, that's what I use as a blue color. I mean, you don't have to use a blue. You could probably actually use a brown, but it depends on what kind of look you're trying to give your model. And so your results can definitely change a lot from there. Hi, Line Key. I hope I'm saying that right. Linekey. Yeah, it's one of those. I had to have said it right at least one of those times. So here we are so far. I'm going to show you guys my Grey Knight prototype, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is basically done with the same technique, except I started with blue and went to silver. Now his gold is just painted, I just painted it gold, the same actually kind of gold that's here. I just painted it gold, washed it, and then highlighted it by hand. And that's what this guy's gold looks like. And you see both of them they get very different results with the exact same colors of gold. Like I swear I used exactly the same thing. Retributor armor and highlighted it with auric armor gold. And so, you know, you get very different results. A greenish metal, I'm certain that you could do it with a greenish metal, but I have not tried it with a greenish metal. So far I've only tried it with the silver on this guy and with the gold on this guy. So, but if you notice on this guy, you know, this is clearly metallic, but it's also more muted than the gold on this one. Like this is super shiny gold on the Grey Knight here, which works okay because it has limited, you know, there's limited amounts of it on him, so it's not quite so garish. Also, he's entirely painted silver, so if that's not garish enough for you already, you know. But on this guy, you know, it's much more muted. It sort of has a sort of earthier tone to it, and I think I like that better for this guy. It makes him a little less cartoony, I think. But a greenish metal, what do I do for that? I'd almost be tempted to like try. Actually, you could probably try something similar, like this Mornfang brown. It's a slightly reddish brown. I would probably maybe try a slightly darker, slightly more reddish brown, and then, you know, try dry brushing like a green metal over that. And probably the less green that you add to the metal, probably the more real it'll look. Like take some silver and you know, add a little bit of green to it and try that. And when you get to your final highlight, just use like an actual silver, like, you know, Runefang. It doesn't have to be quite as bright as Runefang steel, but just use like a more pure silver, and you know, give it a light, very, very light dry brush of that at the end, and you know, that should work pretty well. All right, so a little bit more of the blue, not much, and we'll move on to silver parts. Silver parts should be pretty easy too. Our approach to the silver is going to be very straightforward and no weirdness. Very conventional approach. All right. So his hammer, this part of his tabard down here, you know, is all going to be silver. And we don't want it to be like a super bright silver. I think we want some little more, you know, almost like if you didn't notice it on the model, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So Looks like we only have 2 elements that are going to be silver. So, unless I decided I wanted to do like the little spaces in here, but honestly, I'll probably just try to do those like leather. Like, you know, like he's wearing, you know, some kind of leather, I don't want to say apron or like shirt or whatever underneath, but maybe like the joins on his, in his armor are, you know, covered with leather just to give him some added protection in places that would normally be like weaknesses in his armor. So that's probably how we'll approach those, but for now, let's get to the metal. And maybe if we're feeling really crazy, we can even try to do like weathering on the leather parts. But let's take one thing at a time here. I'm not really sure about this lettering on his hammer. If I want to go back and do it in gold later. We'll see. We'll see how I like it when it's in silver. I may actually go back and paint a few elements on this hammer in gold. So if you've been with us the entire time, you definitely probably noticed by now how much longer the blue takes than literally everything else we've done. That's, yeah. It's not unusual for some elements on a model to be really easy and go really fast, and then you get to another element and it really slows you down. But it doesn't necessarily mean you want to cut out that element. If it adds like a lot of, you know, sharpness or character or, you know, uniqueness, whatever you want to call it, you know, gives it that je ne sais quoi that you really need to really make your model something to be proud of, or at least happy with. You know, take the time and do it. You know, as long as it doesn't add a million billion years to every single model, where you just can't stand it, or you already know from the very beginning you will never finish it. You know, definitely set yourself aside some time and, you know, have some patience to, you know, add those details. You know, the blue on this guy, not super easy, you know, to do. I mean, it's not hard. It's just, but it is time consuming. But it's definitely worth it for me to do this, you know, this kind of shading with the, you know, do some wet blending with the blue, just to make him stand out a little bit more. I think it's completely worth it, because the time investment is not really all that big. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the faster you'll get at it, and it, you know, won't be so bad. The first few may take a while, but then after that, you'll just breeze through them probably. Another tip, if you want to really start doing, you know, wet blending, like, you know, what I did with these shoulders and so forth, and even, you know, any kind of detail work, you have to make sure you get yourself some really good brushes. People often underestimate how big of a difference the brush you use makes in painting a model. Yeah, and that's one of my things. Is normally I'm not Jack O'Bana. I don't really disagree with you too much. I'm not really drawn to like all metallic armies myself. Like Custodes look kind of neat, and then you start painting them, and you're like, wow, all these guys kind of look the same, and they all look like, you know, they all look like somebody shredded a bundle of copper and threw it on a table. Which can definitely happen to you. You know, when you start painting a metallic army, you just kind of get hypnotized by the metallicism, and everything just starts looking like that one metal color you were painting your model in. And that's sort of like, that's part of the reason why I did it this way. I'm trying to sort of find a way that I can paint a model all gold, and still try to keep it interesting, try to keep it from being too bland. And yeah, so that's the efforts have so far brought us this far, but we're not done yet. I mean, there's a whole lot of elements that are still going to be different colors, so we'll see if we can break it up enough yet. Maybe not, but we'll see. But I definitely hear you, you know, and that is a criticism of basically every metallic army in miniature wargaming, is, you know, ultimately metallics are not terribly exciting paint jobs to look at for most people. And so that's particularly why a lot of people try to do Custodes and, you know, these what do they call them? See, I can't even remember now. Whatever these Sigmarite guys are called. Stormcast Eternals. They try to do them in non-metallic metal, but they can only do a few of them, like, you know, like a character, you know, or some kind of, you know, really cool looking model. And then that's all they do with them. It's just those one or two models, and then they're done. Because it would just take them ages to paint a whole army with that technique. It would look amazing, but I doubt they would ever actually be able to finish it. Maybe Custodes, just because you don't need that many models with them. But Stormcast Eternal army in all non-metallic metal, my God, it would take ages. Just no, I'm not gonna do it. Yeah, and that is another thing about Stormcast Eternals. Like, I can show you 10 different Stormcast Eternal models, and then, like, you know, put them all away for about, you know, a minute or two, and then bring them all, you know, and bring them all out again and say, hey, which was the third one I showed you? Oh no, they all look the same, you know? They might have had different weapons or different pose, maybe. But otherwise, you know, Sigmarite armies kind of all, you know, the Sigmarites all kind of look the same. All the Stormcast Eternals, they just kind of blend together. Now, that being said, there is one thing I can say that sort of redeems them on that fact. That individually, you know, no one Stormcast Eternal model is usually that exciting, unless they're like the big, huge, you know, dragon, you know, being ridden by a Stormcast Eternal. Yeah, that thing's pretty cool. It's got a lot going on, so you can't really call it that boring. But when you put these guys together on a tabletop, because they have such a simple aesthetic, they have a very easy to unify aesthetic. So they actually, while they're not necessarily very exciting looking as individuals, they actually look really good as an army. And I think that is the big thing that GW is looking for, or was looking for anyway, when they designed these guys. And if you think about it, you know, Space Marines aren't much different. You know, a lot of Space Marine chapters are just one color, and that's it. You know, like the only thing that's any different from their armor is their bolter, you know, has some silver on it. And how do they make it interesting? Because they look interesting as an army. So that's one thing you do have to consider when you're painting models that are going to be part of a whole entire force, is you do have to consider how it will look as an army, and whether or not it will look unified. You know, how much can I bring them together to look like they're a, you know, force that belongs together aesthetically. So, I mean, I've had that in the past where I painted a model and it looked amazing by itself, and then I put it with the other guys it was supposed to be fighting beside, and it just did not belong with them at all. You know, and they just did not go together. And it's important to be able to, you know, have an army that looks like it has unity, because armies like that just look really impressive. Like, you can take somebody who is not as good of a painter, but painted an army that looked like it was unified, and sit that next to another army where somebody painted extremely well, but none of their stuff really looks like it belongs together, and the other guys, you know, the first guy's army is going to appear to be the better army. And that's, you know, that's something not to be underestimated if you're doing wargaming. You know, if you're just painting single miniatures, you know, do whatever you need to do to make the model, you know, work together with itself. But when you're painting a whole army, think about how it looks as an army. And that's sort of what I did with my Grey Knights. If you look at my Grey Knight prototype, as a model by itself, it's not terribly amazing. The blue is almost, you know, too visible. But if you put it with a whole bunch of other models painted similarly, with their basing scheme, along with, you know, looking with the blue being a little bit more, a little less obvious when you're looking at it as a whole army, it fits together a whole lot better, in my opinion. Hey, Croquegg, how you doing? Welcome, buddy. Well, I actually chose this one, Jacobana, because he's actually fairly simple. He doesn't have a whole lot, you know, he doesn't have too many, like, little doodads that have to be done. And I did that on purpose because, you know, he is the first Stormcast Eternal I'm painting. So I wanted to make sure that that I was working with something that was not the busiest of the lot. Like, there's a guy, you know, this is one of the Shadespire ones, the Liberators, and there's, you know, the guy who has his helmet off, you know, is all impressive with his sword, you know, and you can see his face and all that. And I thought, yeah, he's pretty cool. I can't wait to paint him, but I'm not going to start with him first, because if I paint a prototype and I don't like it, and I have to start over again, it's very difficult when that model has like a pose with lots of convolutions and easily broken parts. It's very hard to strip him down without accidentally breaking something. With this guy, all I'd really have to worry about is this. These little lightning, you know, adornments. If I could strip him without breaking those off, then I'd be fine. So that's why I started with this guy. And usually, you know, the guys with the least breakable stuff on them, when you're, you know, thinking ahead about whether or not you'd have to clean it, usually those guys tend to be the more boring examples anyway. So, you know, yeah, it is what it is. But we will be getting to the other two. The I guess, you know, sort of obvious leader because I don't have my helmet on guy. You know, when I was in the Marines, usually the guy without his helmet on was was not the guy in charge. It was the guy, you know, trying to get himself killed because he didn't listen. But nope, in the world of Games Workshop, in all worlds of Games Workshop, the guy without his helmet on is obviously the guy in charge. And from, you know, just from a purely aesthetic viewpoint, you know, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see, like, you know, your veteran sergeant running out there with no helmet on, you know, barking out his orders, even though I'm not sure how people hear him when he's not actually talking into his comm mic or anything. Yep. Yeah, I think that's fair, Asavar. Yeah, in some ways you can say they're uglier Space Marines. I will say this, though. I think they're slightly less boring than Space Marines. Because you almost always have to paint these guys in two tones, which is always more interesting than just monocolor. And I see so many monocolor Space Marines just like, really? This is all you can do? And like, you know, Games Workshop over the years has taken color schemes from Space Marine armies that had two colors and like actually like dumbed them down into monocolor. So it's like only gotten worse over time. Yeah, Jacko, that's definitely yeah, they've definitely gotten some crazy helmets over the years. Alright, we're gonna paint a little bit of Mephiston red on here, just to give us an idea. It's not gonna be this bright. We're gonna wash it, you know, nice and darkly, so that it won't be quite so bright in the end. You know, the highlights obviously will, and so on, but overall it won't look quite that bright. Well, we gotta start somewhere. And I kind of want to get an idea of how it's going to look when we start adding these elements in. Yep, that's very true, Asavar. And I think one of the things that makes Stormcast not always quite so exciting is metallic. It's tough to make an army interesting when it's all metallic. It's one of those weird things. Like, you know, Iron Warriors was my very first army I ever painted. And I was actually, I mean, people considered me to be a really good painter when I first started, but it was really hard to, like, I could show someone a model. And they would be like, wow, that's really good. But if I showed them my whole army, like from, you know, several feet away, it just looked like this big sea of dull silver models. And so it was very hard for, you know, people to really, you know, appreciate the effort I put into my army, because my army didn't look very good. I mean, even to me, it didn't look very good from a distance. It just looked like a bunch of silver dudes. And, you know, you could only tell that really any effort was made in these models if you got really close to them. And that's one of the problems with metallics. They make it tough. You have to know what you're doing if you're going to do a metallic army, and you want it to not look super boring. And here I'm just starting out with Shadespire, getting the, you know, warband for Shadespire done. That's 3 models. So, you know, if I decide that they just look too boring, I don't have to ever do a Stormcast Eternal army. I mean, I might not anyway, but, you know, or if I ever did, I would decide just to kind of ditch doing a metallic color. And I mean, that's entirely something you could do. If you want to do Stormcast Eternals, don't be dissuaded by, you know, the metallic versus non-metallic argument. If you want to do Stormcast Eternals and you know, you think metallic's going to look boring, then don't paint them a metallic color. Just paint them, you know, regular fully saturated colors, non-metallics, and, you know, they'll look fine. As long as you choose, two colors that look really, that, complement each other really well, you will have zero problems. But just keep in mind, anytime you want to paint a metallic army, there are going to be pitfalls that you're going to have to address. It's not going to be as easy as you might think when you first start it. And this is as someone who has found themselves running into getting themselves metallic armies when they know that metallic armies have trouble. I got rid of my Iron Warriors many years ago, mostly because the models were getting old, so if I was ever going to start playing them again, I would just get all new models to do them. I still like Iron Warriors as an army, I just can't think of a way to make them look exciting. And then I got Grey Knights, which have exactly the same problem. So my blue as a base coat technique was how I tried to kind of solve that. And on an individual model per model basis, it makes them look a little less detailed, because it kind of makes them brighter overall. So it makes their armor, at least, look less detailed. But when you put them next to each other, I think it makes them just look a lot better as an army. And that's really what the important part is. When you're going for tabletop war games, is how do your minis look like together? Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be. He's not going to be running out there with a Twizzler, which is what it looks like right now. It really looks like he's just running at you with a hammer being held by the stiffest Twizzler that ever came out of a candy shop. But once we add some shading and highlighting to it, it'll look a little bit more like a handle. Oh, silver and steel. Okay, so silver and steel is kind of tough because they both have, a little bit of bluish element to them. I think, like my Grey Knights, for instance, if you were here when I showed those, I think those come off more as silver because they're more blue. But it also depends on the person's perception of what silver is, because silver is not necessarily, more blue. It has kind of a, I don't know if you've ever actually seen real silverware. It has sort of this tinge of color to it. It's not entirely silverish in the way that you'd normally think of, when you think of this as being silver. It has just a little bit, sort of like a slightly, it has this sort of almost yellowish tinge to it that's just barely perceptible. But, you can definitely tell, if you've seen real silver, you can tell it from, fake silver, or from, something that's just stainless steel. Alright, now we're getting to the part where it gets really difficult to get down here. But as Matt Fontaine, one of the world's best, says, if you can't see it, don't paint it. Don't waste your time trying to paint something neither you nor anyone else is ever going to see. He was notorious for winning Golden Demons with models that didn't even have the bottoms painted on them. Yeah, and I don't know if you were here earlier, Wicked. Let me pull out my Grey Knight again. So, this is, you know, I went extreme blue with the look of this guy's armor. So, you know, does this come off as steel or does it come off as silver? To me, it's a very slight amount of both, but also because he has all these gold elements around him, they kind of, you know, they kind of lend a little bit of their yellow to the overall look of the model, and that can make it look a little bit more silvery. But yeah, this is you can see for yourself. This is what extreme blue does. Is it silver or is it steel? You know, that's up to you. Okay, so I think we're almost good with the red. At least for the handle, and we still got to do the scabbard. And whatever the thing is next to it looks like a cowbell. Yeah, that makes sense, Jacko. Yeah. Hmm. He's got a fever. The only prescription is more cowbell. Alright. Sorry if you can't see where I'm painting the whole time, because it's kind of a weird angle. So, this guy's carrying the cowbell, and he looks like Will Ferrell. Why doesn't the guy with his helmet off look like Christopher Walken? That's what I want to know. Hey Stony, so what I did for the gold was I undercoated the whole model with Mournfang Brown spray, and then touched it up anywhere I needed to with just Mournfang Brown out of the pot. And then I dry brushed on Retributor armor. Give it a, you know, not a messy but generous dry brush. Then, oh, wrong one. And then give it, you know, a decent Auric Armor Gold dry brush, just enough where you notice the difference. And then a very light Runefang Steel, just to, you know, give a little bit of silver edge highlight on the, you know, very sharp edges. And that's really all you want to apply it to, is the very sharp edges on it. And that gives you, you know, pretty quick and easy gold armor that's a little bit more muted than just painting it a solid, you know, metallic color and then, you know, washing it and highlighting it. Now, there's nothing wrong with the old-fashioned way either. Depends on the model you're doing. Sometimes just putting on a metallic color, washing it, and then dry brushing your highlight onto it works just fine. In fact, I'll show you. This is, you know, this is if you take, where is it? Which metal is it? Take Runelord Brass and Lead Belcher. You know, you just paint them as you normally would on the model as base colors, and then I just wash them with Agrax Earthshade, and then go back and just dry brush it lightly with Runefang Steel. Now you see the main carapace, you'll still see it looks like it's just been washed, which it has. Like I haven't done this half yet with the highlights, but this side here, this arm in particular, what I just described is all I did. I painted the metal base colors on, I washed it, you know, carefully to, you know, not have any pooling. Because if you do have any pooling, you'll have to do a little bit of touching up with your base metals first, like right here. See that little spot right there? I'll have to do a little bit of touching up before I do the highlight dry brush. But over here, I actually didn't have to do any of that. All this turned out really well without having to do anything special. So, so yeah, you can definitely do metals solid. Nothing wrong with that at all. Looks great on that model in my opinion. In fact, I wouldn't try to do it like this on him. Not least of which because a lot of dry brushing on that guy is problematic because he has airbrushed gray, and I don't want to mess that up. So, kind of limits where and how much I can do dry brushing on him. A lot of the places where I do the silver highlight at the end, I just do it by hand. It's actually pretty easy though. So. Yeah, I think so. Well, actually, I'm not sure about. So, what I really want to do sometime is if I ever get my hands on like a Custodes model, I want to figure out how I can do copper without making it just look terrible. Because for the infantry models for Custodes, it's not so bad as long as the person knows what they're doing. But with vehicles, the copper vehicles just look awful, just terrible. I mean, a metallic Land Raider is usually pretty bad anyway, but a metallic Land Raider that's just solid copper is it's nightmare fuel for, you know, for me, because I just like no, never want to paint something like that. Oh no, the model I was showing actually is Deathjack from War Machine. It's a Crix Warjack. So, interestingly enough, though, if you had to compare, you know, a faction in Warhammer 40k to Crix in War Machine, Necron would like certainly be the one that would come up. That would be, you know, the most comparable faction in terms of like the overall theme, because they are sort of the undead faction of the game. And you know, they have a very characteristic green glow wherever they have, because they have, you know, this stuff they call necrotite that they burn for fuel, or that fuels them, and so, you know, it glows green when it's burning, and so, you know, they have this green glow, very similar like what the Necrons have, with, you know, a lot of their with a lot of the ways people choose to paint them, which has been kind of common due to the fact that they give you these rods that are green plastic to put in their weapons, kind of pigeonholes people a bit into the green look for their Necrons. I'm kind of glad that they've kind of gone away from that with their newer stuff. I like that people can have more choice now. They don't feel like they're obligated to go with that one color. Though, I mean, it was always possible to, like, you know, just prime the green rods and paint them a different color. But, you know, the glowy rods were kind of neat at the time, you know. It's kind of a thing that's not nearly as novel as it was back then. You know, nowadays it's kind of like, yeah, I could take it or leave it. Especially when you have, you know, weird, you know, the guys who make Malifaux. I mean, they make entire Malifaux gangs now that are just in translucent plastic of various colors. So, you know, the novelty on that can wear off pretty quickly unless you're doing something where you can actually take advantage of the translucence effect. Like I saw a guy who did, like, I can't remember what the name of the model is, but it's this very ghostly looking model that has like this real skull that sort of like floats in the air behind like all of the misty ghostness that comes off of it. And he got like the green translucent models and then painted the skull part of the model. So it's got this skull, you know, it's like really cool looking, and it just looks like it's billowing this green translucent smoke. It's actually pretty cool. I like what he did with it. So sometimes it's neat, but, you know, sometimes it's just kind of a gimmick. And I think in the case of Necrons, you know, the novelty of the translucence gimmick is kind of worn off. You know, kind of evidenced by the fact that none of their new stuff has it. Alright. Alright. Alright, let's see how we're doing so far. So, other than this, you know, banner coming off, pretty much have all of his, you know, main colors are now on him, except for, like, you know, leather details and so on. Oh, I need to do his, the handle on his weapon. That's, on his backup weapon, I guess you could call it. Yep. It's always important to have a backup. Geez. Yeah, actually, there are a lot, you know what, Wicked, there are a lot of models like that. There are a ton of models like that, unfortunately. Like, if I painted every model that I thought was amazing, I'd probably never actually get around to painting an army. What am I saying? I don't ever get around to painting an army. I have almost no painted armies, like not in any GW game anyway. I have painted armies in historical stuff, and that's it. So, so I'm kind of living in that nightmare that I've built for myself. But, but that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm getting into Shadespire now, is because I paint 3 models. I have a painted gang now. I have a whole war. Like I have everything I need to paint to play the game now. All painted. It's... But yeah. And also why I'm working on a Malifaux gang, so if you want a little sneak at my Malifaux gang, here's my Barbaros. Yeah, they're coming along. They're coming along. And they'll get some painting time on stream, you know, but I had a lot of time that I painted on stream with them, and so for the sake of those who watch this all the time, I want to kind of break it up and do something a little different. And this is very different. It's the first time I've done a Stormcast Eternal, that's for sure. So, let's do some washing. Oh yeah, tell me about it, Stony. I mean, not just the Forge World Primarch models, mind you. I actually, my wife got me Mortarion for Christmas. And so, yeah, that's gonna come around sometime. Sometime I will be working on that on stream, but it could be a long while before I get around to it, because first I still have to decide how I'm gonna do my Death Guard in general. Done a few so far. I'm doing the white scheme, and now I'm thinking I want to try a few in the green scheme and see which I like better. Because the white scheme actually looks pretty good, but it takes a lot of work. And so I want to make sure that I have looked at all the options before I just pick which one I'm going to do. Because I don't want to pick the wrong one. Picking the wrong one would be super bad. You don't want to take the time it takes to, you know, paint a Death Guard army and, you know, figure out towards the end that you didn't like it, that you did it wrong, you know, in your opinion, that it looks wrong. And, yeah. I'd rather avoid that. I mean, I think I would like it either way, honestly, you know, based on my on my white prototype, which is more painted, versus my green prototype, which only has like basically the green with just the weathering on it. I think I could go either one, but I think the green would be much less hassle. A lot less hassle in the long run. Because it's easier to match different elements or contrast different elements of the armor from the green than it is the white. And if you have to do any touch-ups or anything, the green is just super, super easy compared to trying to fix any issues with the white. And so I'm definitely going to try to finish a green prototype before I decide which one to go. So let's get this, because if anything needs toning down on this model, it is this red handle. Make sure we didn't get any of this wash in a place we didn't want it. Okay. And there are going to be a few other things we're going to have to wash in this color too, like leather parts and so on, I think. But for now, those things are not going to be a big determinant of the overall look of the model, I don't think. So right now, I'm focusing more on the things that are going to affect how basically all of the Stormcasts that I paint this way will look. Oh, I forgot to paint the red on the cowbell. Oh well. I'll do that later. Yeah, white is a pain. White and black are both pains because when your eye looks at them, your brain basically gets a message, not that this is a color, but that this is a shape. So you get this nebulous white shape, and you just kind of like, okay. So it's very difficult because of the way your eye sees white and black to paint models that are white and black. Or both. You know, you basically have to, you can't paint just like a pure like Abaddon black model. You have to have something that's a little bit like Kentor blue is probably a little bit too blue, but there's some really dark blues, some really dark purples that can pull it off, like Incubi Darkness. When it's next to the right colors, it can look like black, or it can look like something that's been painted black at least, but is, you know, in some kind of light. you know, you put it next to Abaddon black, though, it's a little bit different. Actually, this is really good for shading bronzes in certain ways. Like you're trying to make something that's like a coal furnace or something like that. That kind of thing works really well with. So while we wait for that to dry, I'm gonna show you guys my prototype, almost finished prototype for the white Death Guard. He's not completely finished. There's still a few details I need to finish, like the smoke on the top of him, and there's some of the horns are not finished, but he's mostly done. And when I finish varnishing him, then I'm going to add Nurgle's Rot to all of this. So it's going to be a lot like this slime on the base. In all of like the little areas that you see green in the little pustules and so on. So, but if you can imagine it was difficult finding a combination that goes around white and still looks decent, you're right, it was. And here is the green. Now you can ignore the metal banding because I was just testing out different kinds. Like here is, you know, sort of more coppery looking metal, and this is a more tin looking metal. This is probably the one I'd actually go with. It's sort of more, you know, brass or bronze looking. But the chipping, as you can see, you know, I think it works extremely well with the green. And I think it's easier, I think it's more forgiving to do this scheme with the green. Because I think the weathering is probably more convincing with the green than it will be with the white. So, I'm going to do up a prototype like that at some point and decide what I want to do ultimately with it. Because that is an army that I do want to like put a lot of effort into and make it, you know, make it the way I like it, and you know, be willing to spend time on each model to make them look good. Oh yeah, that is definitely tough. Yeah, I imagine that having any kind of color blindness and doing miniature painting has got to be a super pain, because you could be as good as anyone else in the world at brushwork, you know, and knowing what techniques to use and all of that, and then, you know, you get to color theory and, you know, what you see is not the same thing everyone else sees, and that's definitely a problem. You know, it's not insurmountable, but it does create a lot of complexity that you have to keep in mind with anything you're doing. So, it's getting to be almost 6. We're not done till 6:30, but there was something I definitely said in the announcement for the stream that I was going to go over, so we're definitely going to go over that. And once we're done with that, we'll see if we could do a little bit more on this guy before we're done. But, I mean, looking at him, we made a ton of progress on this guy. I mean, look at him. He's, you know, 60, 70% done at least. I mean, you know, we just do the highlights on the silver. We start highlighting the red parts. We do all the little, you know, we finish the blue banding. We finish, you know, we start doing all the leather parts, which are just, you know, some straps here, some, you know, his belt here. And then we do this little, you know, banner that's coming off of his weapon. And then he's done. Well, other than the base, you know, the base is the base. You know, the model essentially is done at that point. Which, if you haven't been here for previous streams, this is pretty much the most, this is the closest a model has gotten to done from the very beginning. So, oh yeah, that's a good point, Wicked. Yeah, Yeah, definitely check out Frontline Gaming and ask Brandon about what he does, because he knows what he's doing. So he is definitely a good resource to tap into for advice on that. All right, so now what we're going to go over for a little bit is how to use pigments, dry pigments, to enhance your models. We're only going to go over dirt right now. I don't have anything that I need to apply rust to, but it can also be used for rust and several other things, verdigris and so on. But for now, we're just going to do dirt. Just plain old dirt. Which... Oh, sorry, I should have got these models out earlier, but I was traveling with them yesterday and forgot to pull some of them out. Alright, so this will be our subject. This is a Gepard anti-aircraft gun from West Germany, developed in the 60s, went into use in the 70s, and yeah, it is super rippy. You basically just pointed and clicked on a target that your camera showed you, and then after that, this thing locked onto it and would not unlock until it had obliterated it. So yeah, and that was something they had in the early 70s. So you can imagine the Soviets probably found it pretty scary, and it didn't take them all that long before they developed their own similar platform, the Shilka. So, things you want to have. I recommend definitely having a good pigment fixer. I've only ever used MIGs, and I can definitely say it works really well. There are probably other ones out there, like I'm sure Vallejo has a pigment fixer by now. You know, so don't be afraid to try another product out if you don't have access to everything that I'm showing you today. I'm also using MIG's Europe Dust pigment. It works extremely well. There are definitely other products out there that probably work equally well, but I've always used MIGs for this purpose up till now, at least for the dust. And I've always had good results with it. So I have tried Vallejo pigments for certain other things, though, like verdigris. For desert dust, I've used Vallejos because they have this nice, slightly greenish dust one that works really well if you're doing like you know, a desert model. It's hard to make sand to stand out on something that's already painted like a desert tan. So they add like a little greenish tinge to it, and it makes it stand out on, you know, against the backdrop of an otherwise tan model. Let me rinse out my water bottle real quick. My water cup, jar, what have you. I guess paint jar is what people call it most of the time, which seems kind of weird because you don't put paint really in it, or at least not intentionally. Alright, so here you can put the nice brush away. And pull out. Basically, you can use the same thing as you use for dry brushing. But you want it to be fairly dry. And then you want another brush that you can apply the fixer with. And you can use even another dry brush for that. I'm just going to use this old brush that I don't care about. So we're going to take some of the... Now you don't have to do it in this order. You can actually put on the pigments first and then put on the fixer. It's actually very, very forgiving. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. A little bit better focus here. Okay. So, and for this fixer, you don't want it to be applied too thick. You just want sort of a thin film of it. Anything else, and it will dry to be kind of, it'll dry a little bit shiny or greasy, or, you know, I don't know. It won't look good. Let's put it that way. Now, you can still fix that. You can actually take more of the pigment fixer and just wet a brush with it and brush it up against it, and it will actually remove, you know, any kind of staining that you get from overusing the pigment fixer. So, something to note there. Alright, we're just going to do this track here to start with. Now this stuff is, I believe, petroleum based, so you know, you don't want to do any brush licking with it. So, you know, make sure you've washed your brushes thoroughly. Alright, now for this stuff, you just stick a dry brush in there, it'll pick some of it up, and you just get it on there. The stuff is really dusty because it's just dry pigments. So, you know, when you get stuff that collects in your, I don't know what that is, but that is not dust. At least not pigment. That's trying to mimic dust. Anything that collects on the surface you're working on, which is why I'm using a paper plate for this, you can just take that and just put it right back into this jar again, and it works just fine. And I recommend that because, you know, you really don't want to waste this stuff if you can help it. And that allows you to also be a little bit more generous when you're applying it, so that you don't have to do this millions and millions of times to get the look you want. And this stuff will, if you just like apply more layers of it and keep using fixer to apply them, you can actually apply this stuff to look like caked mud. Absolutely. So it's not just to give it like a sandy look, you can give it a muddy look, you can do a lot of different stuff with it. And right now it looks really muddy because it's still wet, but once it dries, it will look actually quite different. Alright. And a lot of this will come off when we actually go back and clean it off when it's dry. I'm going to just do a little bit of brushing here because we don't want too much of this, for at least I don't want too much of it to be up here in this area. Most of this you see here will actually come off. Oh crap. Yeah, and don't blow on anything like I just did, because your pigment will go flying, and yeah, I probably don't need to explain why that's bad. And you know how many tanks I've done this with? You'd think that I would, you know, not do that anymore, but no. And, you know, this technique is not limited at all to small scale and historical minis. Like, you can totally do this stuff with GW models, though I would probably only use like this stuff on like tank tracks and so on for GW models. But it definitely works for for scaled up models. It doesn't have to be small scale models. In fact, this stuff was developed specifically for large models like, you know, God, I don't really even know my large, you know, model scales, but like 1/50th, 1/35th, or whatever the scale is that they use for, like, you know, the big tank models. I see them all the time just because I want to kind of pilfer their techniques, but I don't actually remember what their scales are. Alright, so here probably needed to... We're actually going to go a little bit in reverse here. I'm going to try to apply more of this stuff. It must be a little bit humid right now because stuff seems a little bit less dusty than usual. It could be my brush. And then take some fixer. See, like I said, you can go, you can go either direction. You can apply fixer and then put on pigments, or you can put on pigments and then apply fixer. And if you end up overdoing it in some spot, most of the time you can just brush it off, or even take some fixer and just, you know, wet the brush with some fixer, and just start wiping away at it, and eventually it'll pick it up and remove it, because the fixer is a great solvent for itself. So it's really good at removing it. I know this looks extremely muddy now, but when it's dry, you'll see it'll look very different. And most of this you see here actually will come off. Now, if I wanted it to stay like this super muddy, I could just keep adding fixer to it to, like, you know, sort of permanize it. But I want most of it to come off. I just want the tracks to look dusty. I don't want them to look muddy for this particular tank. So I guess tank is not entirely accurate. But it's not entirely inaccurate too, since the Gepard is on a Leopard 1 tank chassis. And for any of you who are considering playing Team Yankee, this is quite a formidable vehicle, the Gepard. It can essentially kill anything. It's meant to be an anti-aircraft gun, but it can basically kill anything in the game that's not a heavy main battle tank. And even then, it can do it if it can get behind it. So I forgot to get a little bit up here. This is something that always adds some realism to where you put a decal, is to, you know, put some kind of weathering or dirtiness near it, and that always helps it to blend in as part of the model. Something I always like to do when I have models that have lots of decals. Add some weathering or dirt around it. Alright, now we just have the rear. And you see we have a decal here. We definitely want to dirty that up some. Give it some realism. And I'm just kind of taking off some of the excess because I don't want my fixer pooling, because it's gonna leave a mess if you do that. And you really don't need that much to fix a good amount of the pigment to the model. So, alright. When you're first applying it though, I mean, go nuts with this stuff. Put it on there. So, in fact, this one I'm probably going to have to... I think my brush likes to collect too much of it back again. I think it's the first time I've used this brush to do, specifically to do pigments with. So, may have to give it another round and use a different brush. And the reason we need to use the fixer for this is because this stuff is essentially makeup. You're just putting makeup on your model if you don't use fixer. And so if you put your hand on it, it gets wet, whatever, it will just come right off. The fixer is the only thing that will hold it onto your model. I mean, you can do other things too, like use varnish and stuff like that. And that will also work, but the fixer will not change the color, whereas mixing it with something else will make it look more like it's wet and dark, and you might not necessarily want that. I think I've tried it before. It does work, but it's never been something I needed for a project that I was working on. Like, for example, if you look at my Gray Knights, I mean, they're standing on this, red, broken wasteland, and I could probably go get like a red pigment and dust them with it, but I don't think it would really add anything to them. So I primarily stick with using it on vehicles. I don't really use it on infantry, but it's certainly worth experimenting, especially if you're doing like, Imperial Guard who are trudging through mud and sand or whatever, or maybe Death Guard, those are definitely worth trying. And there are pigments, like this is meant to look like, dry dust when it's finished. But there are other ones that are supposed to look muddier when they're finished. And so that would be kind of one of the things you'd want to look at, I think, for what you have in mind. Yeah. I'm going to need a new paper towel after this, because this one is thoroughly soaked from the day's adventures. Alright, so I want to empty this back into here, but I'm not going to do that until this is dry and I, take off the excess, because I want to collect that as well. So we're going to sit this to the side. We got about 20 minutes left in the stream, but it'll probably be dry by then, so we can see that before we're finished for the day. But I'd like you all to see what it looks like when it's actually dry. If it's not, I will pull out a different one of my vehicles that's already finished, and you can see what it'll look like when it's done. So let me just grab some more paper towels. Alright, fresh paper towel, and bam, back to our buddy. Let me see what our best focus range is here. It's pretty good. Alright. But yeah, the simple answer, Wicked, is yeah, you definitely can. You definitely can do that. It's going to take some experimentation because you want to keep it looking wet. Like maybe mix the pigments with some gloss varnish. I don't know. May not actually work very well that way. There may be some pigments though that look more like mud when they're finished than this stuff, than the Europe dust. So you have to look around a little bit. And in any case, even if it didn't, you can do it like partly up their leg so that it looks dry, the further you get up their leg, and then as it goes further and further down, it gets muddier and muddier. And that really gives you like a realistic look of having trudged through mud. Because if you ever see like soldiers are actually trudging through mud, trust me on this, done it myself, through knee-deep mud or even higher, it's going to be sort of like a transition where it starts, you have this sort of dry-looking dirt that goes, 6 or so inches, above where the mud starts, and then from the mud it starts going down, wetter and muddier. So the dry pigments would definitely work for that, especially for the top part. And then as you get further down, you can even just use like dark brown paints and stuff like that for the rest of it. All right, where are we at on this guy? Let's work on the highlights for the silver. Bring out the same trusty dry brush. This guy has been getting really abused today. That's the life of a brush that has been relegated to the dry brush roll. And here we're just going to dry brush the original lead belcher that we painted everything, all the silver with. For the hammer, because it's easy to dry brush it without getting it on anything else. All right. There we go. And here we're just going to highlight these scales one by one, just a little bit, doesn't take much. In fact, considering how we're going to highlight them, in the end, you could probably skip doing this with the original color on these parts. This part, anyway. But I like to do it because then if I see something that's like this blue that's kind of encroached a little bit here, I can fix that. Which I wouldn't want to do with my highlight color. It would just be too bright. And then probably too much there. Just let our brush remove some of that. The stuff I was using is called Pigment Fixer. Definitely recommend it if you want to experiment with pigments. It's way easier to work with than any like alternative means of trying to attach pigments to your models. Trust me, I've tried. I was like, I've got to have something on hand I can use to attach these, and in the end, I finally broke down and ordered some pigment fixer, and it was one of those like eureka moments, basically, where you're like, what was I thinking trying to do this without this? It's like working with Q-tips and then somebody hands you a paintbrush instead for the first time. It's like that much difference in how much easier it is to work with it. Alright, let's get our final highlight onto the silver. Just a light Runefang steel dry brush. Actually, we can get some of it on our gold because it's the same highlight we used on the gold. In fact, normally I'd probably just do all these first so that I could just dry brush them all together with the gold, since they're going to have the same highlight. I won't have to be quite so careful with it, but with the prototype, you don't really worry so much about how to make things more efficient while you're doing it. You just take your lessons learned and go from there. For the first model, you just do what you gotta do. Alright, so that's pretty decent. And then I take some of this Runefang steel. And highlight our scaly looking tabard. I do have to say this, I mean, these things actually, these scales draping off of his belt do look protective. I mean, at least I certainly can't see myself stabbing a knife through it. Let's add a little bit of that there. A little bit. Not sure what happened there, but there, fixed. Okay, that's the silver bits all done. Yeah, let's address this while we actually remember it exists. Get the cowbell, or whatever this thing is supposed to be. That's not good. Come on. There we go. Alright. I assume it's just some kind of container that it's actually supposed to have a bottom and is not actually a cowbell. But the shape is suspicious. Alright. See if I can even get in here. Alright. Falls into the category of why am I even doing this? No one's gonna ever see it. Alright. Let me check on our pigmented model and see how it's coming along. See if we're dry yet. A little bit more. Give it a little bit more time. You see back here it's still a little moist. I think I may try to, for the next ones, go dust first and then apply the fixer. I think the fixer is just making it too wet as I apply it, and that's making it difficult to keep it where I want it to be. Alright. Let's do something with this little banner he's got. What was I looking for? There we go. You can see this stuff, Mournfang Brown definitely looks lighter when you're first applying it. Because this is also Mournfang Brown over here. This is the spray Mournfang Brown, but when this stuff dries, it's a lot different. Interesting. Right. So when I'm using pigments, like when I'm doing a base that I want to look like mud, usually I just I'll paint it whatever colors I want it to be, and then I'll paint it with like a gloss varnish at the end, and that will make it look wet and muddy. So generally, no, I won't try that approach for like doing a base in mud. Simply because the pigments themselves don't really have any like texture. I mean, they do have texture to them, but it's kind of thin. So if I want to do it like on a base like this, if I put a whole bunch of it on here, it would still look kind of thin. Whereas, you know, if you use like Sterling Mud, or which, not exactly actually both of these, yeah, Sterling Mud and Sterling Battlemire, you put those on there, those go on really thick, and like you can see this guy's base I did with it. You know, you get a lot of texturing out of that. And if I wanted to look like wet mud, I would just, you know, dry brush some, you know, quick highlights on that, and then wash it with like Agrax Earthshade or something, and then to finish it off. Just gloss varnish it with like brush on gloss varnish, and that will give you a pretty muddy look. Like if you saw my Death Guard model, that's what I did with that to make it look muddy. Okay, so is this dried yet? Dried enough. All right. So for the parchment on his little banner thing, let's see if there's any. Really? I like my way better. I don't think they're being entirely honest either about what colors they used. Yeah, I mean, that's really one of my first forays with doing an actual mud base, and I think it turned out well. But I think getting the right kind of texture on your base is important. You want it to look kind of really irregular and, you know, sort of unpredictable. And so what I did was I took Sterling Battlemire and put like big clumps of it into certain places, and then even while it was still wet, I took Sterling mud and started filling in all the gaps in between those big, you know, clumps, and then started just kind of like just pushing them around to make them mesh together a little bit, and then that was it. You know, just sort of like connect them where they meet. Because they mix into each other extremely well. I mean, they're the same color, they're just different textures. One's thicker. And so, it works really well. Guess I can allow a little bit of contact here because I am going to wash this. Let's not have too much though. Now I'm just erasing my work. Yeah, I mean, we've all been there in that stage where we just threw flock on the base and like, yep, it's done. I mean, static grass basically works the same way, and that's what I use in a lot of my smaller scale minis. Oh crap, it's already 6:30. Alright, well, let's put this guy aside and see if the pigments are dry enough, because I have to get going, but let's see how we turned out here. So, you can just get in there, and you gotta make sure you varnish your model before you do this, by the way. Make sure you varnish. Don't do this then varnish, because it will change the look of this, and also this stuff will adhere poorly on a model that has not been matte varnished yet. And yes, I did say matte varnish, so if you use gloss varnish, this stuff will not adhere as well as it should. So, it'll probably still adhere, you know, somewhat or decently, but not as much as you want it to. Unfortunately, it's still not dry here, so you're really not going to you're not going to see it quite as in its full finishedness, I guess you could say. And you can still see it looks pretty dusty up here, and it looks extremely dusty here, but after a few days it's gonna be a little less dusty. It'll tone down a little bit. And if you want it to be more, you can add more. If you want it to be less, you can add just a little bit of the pigment fixer and then just kind of, you know, brush away a little bit of it, and it'll come right off. I mean, you can see it right here. It's just coming off as I move my brush back and forth. And that loose stuff will, you know, come off more and more over time, a little bit of it. Not a whole lot, but a little bit of it will. And you'll get a better idea of how strong the effect will be in the long term. But yeah, there you go. It's nice dirty tracks. And see, I have a little bit of moisture in my brush, so it looks a little wet right now when I do that. But it'll dry out again and it'll look just like these. Unless I use fixer. So, yep. Quick and easy, dirty tracks. And I got to do the other 5 vehicles in this unit, and so if you're here next week, you'll get to see all those finished. And here I just fold up my paper towel. And so most of what I ended up with on my plate is back in the bottle. Alright guys, well I wish I had more time. You know, I actually added an hour to the stream starting today. We started at 3, ending at the usual time. And we got a lot done. I mean, look at this. I mean, this guy, he's nearly finished. And he doesn't have a whole lot left to go before he's done. And I think that's pretty cool for just one stream. We'll be here next Thursday. We'll keep working on other stuff. Maybe there'll still be some Liberators to work on. I might have finished them already by then. We'll see. And either way, there's going to be something out here to paint, and you know, join us to check it out. And if you want more painting action on Bell of Lost Souls, we're going to have Goat Boy in about an hour and a half. He's great with color and great at showing you ways to paint armies fast, so you know, definitely come over and check him out. And in any case, he's hilarious, so you should see him. Alright, see you guys next time. Take care.